The first may be the worst, but the last is part of the progress. When I look back at my first ever YouTube video, I have to laugh. Whilst it might not seem like the worst video in the world, it is still there if you want to go and watch it, by the way. I remember feeling so nervous to share more of myself on the internet, so much so that I didn't even want to speak. I mean, hilarious now, seeing as you can't shut me up. Anyway, I grabbed my camera and I filmed a silent tutorial of me doing my hair along to some music, and it was okay. So this was back in 2015 and I'd been blogging for a couple of years at this point, and editing video felt like a whole other kettle of fish to me when I started. But still, I did it. I filmed and edited and hit publish on my first ever YouTube video. And once my first video was out there, I actually found myself becoming pretty eager to do more. Now, I'd love to say that my next few videos were masterpieces, but they weren't. In fact, it took me a good long while before I started to become happy with my video content. But all of those videos along the way were part of the progress as I learned to edit video, improve my skills, and become more comfortable in front of the camera just being myself. I mean, I'd studied performing arts for years, but it can actually be so hard to just be yourself in front of the camera and relax when you're not acting, or at least that's how I initially found it anyway. Now I feel really comfortable in front of the camera, and my editing skills and my video knowledge has come a heck of a long way too. It's been a journey. The thing is, it's easy to forget that we all have start points. And with anything, progression can never happen if you don't just begin. The funny thing is, after I finally started creating videos, I remember thinking to myself, I should have done this earlier. And the funniest part is that I almost did. So a few years before my first ever YouTube video went live, I sat in my family living room whilst everyone was out. I didn't want anyone to know what I was doing, and I filmed a tutorial of me making a wig. I remember spending hours rearranging furniture to make the setting look just right, fumbling over my words as I spoke and trying to figure out the best angles to show off this wig making process. I think by the end of it, I felt exhausted, probably a little bit frustrated, and after watching the footage back, I felt horrified at how bad it all looked. And so I deleted it. In that moment, I clearly decided it wasn't good enough and that I wasn't good enough in the process. And so I quit before I even began. It clearly wasn't for me, or so I thought. I have to laugh at this now, as creating video is probably one of my strongest skill sets. But at the time, I just wasn't able to see beyond that moment. I wasn't able to see the progression that lay ahead and the potential to improve quite a lot. But luckily, as you know, it didn't deter me forever, and a few years later I finally tried my hand at video once again. And with more than a few stop-starts along the way, I continued to improve, and now creating video content, be it for brands or as part of my own content on Instagram or on here, it's now actually a big part of what I do for my job. But if I'd never started, I would have never got to this point. And don't get me wrong, I still see so much more ahead of me in ways I wish to develop and improve, but each new video I create is a part of my progress. If we always judge ourselves on our first attempt to do something, we likely won't get very far. And I can't say I'm immune to doing this. Ask me about, say, my team sporting abilities, and I'll likely say I'm not very good at sports. At least when it comes to ones where I have to throw and catch a ball, that does not come naturally to me, and I'm really not good at that. But have I ever trained and habitually practiced to become good at a particular team sport? No. So there, my lack of ability also has some relation to my lack of effort. Not that I'd necessarily be a pro, but I probably could be much better. Now you might be thinking, but some people do have natural abilities in certain areas, and I agree to some degree. You can have certain attributes, etc., that can naturally lend themselves to a particular skill or subject. But I can guarantee that the most talented pianist in the world, for example, didn't get to where they are by purely relying on natural talent alone. Of course, it took a lot of practice to enable them to make so much progress. Even they had a start point which wasn't as good as where they are today from putting the work in. I love the quote, "Hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work hard." It can be all too easy to look at someone highly skilled in a certain area and think they've always been that way. I still do this sometimes, and I have to remind myself that each individual will have been on their own journey of progression to get to the level that they're at. I think one of the biggest deterrents we can give ourselves to starting something is believing that we just aren't that good. But if we don't really try, how do we expect to ever improve? Of course, there has to be a level of trying things out and maybe figuring out that some things just aren't for us. Whether it's that we realise that we aren't actually that willing to put the effort in that it takes to progress in that particular area, like me with team sports for instance, I'm just not that bothered about it, or simply because we realise that we actually just don't enjoy that thing we were trying out that much. And of course, that's perfectly okay too. But if there is something that you feel drawn towards or really excited about doing, there has to be a level of expecting that you're not necessarily going to start off amazing at it. But that shouldn't be what stops you from trying to progress in that area altogether. Another great quote, this time from Stephen King: "Talent is cheaper than table salt. What separates the talented individual from the successful one is hard work." See, it can actually work in your favour to know that when you start something, that is actually the worst you are ever going to be at that particular thing. Think about that. Not comparing yourself or your work or your abilities to anyone else, just yourself and your future progression. Your first will no doubt be the worst. There's actually a lot of power in realising that. And then when you've done that thing for the first time, you've got it out of the way. And even if your second attempt is bad, your third, your fourth, your fifth, it doesn't matter, because those are all a part of the progression. A runner wasn't born running. They had to learn how to walk first. And as a baby, they didn't just find that they could one day miraculously run about. They first had to crawl, then find their balance on their feet, with a few setbacks, no doubt, tumbling and falling over plenty of times along the way, until one day they found their steady balance and began to walk. And that's all before even attempting to put one leg in front of the other with any amount of speed to actually run. I say all of this to say, at a time of year when many of us are setting goals and putting plans in place for the future, it's important to remember that progression is a part of the journey. Don't be deterred if you're not perfect at something right away. Perfection is an illusion anyway. As Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson said, success isn't always about greatness, it's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. And maybe there's something you'd like to do, but it just feels so far away from where you are now that you can't even imagine it. Maybe you're deterred to even start by your fears of not being good enough. Well, just remember, with whatever it is, the first may be the worst, but the last is part of the progress. But first you have to start in order to progress. So what are you waiting for?